Welcome back. This is the Quilty Life with Jenn Burt. In this episode, we're going to start a brand new series. So I have pulled all of these fabrics, oranges, blues, yellows, a little bit of a creamy white color here. I might add some more to this as we go along, but this is the color scheme that we are going to use for the next few episodes. So I looked at the first 12 episodes of The Quilty Life. You all really seem to like stack work, so we're going to do some more of that. So let's stop rambling about it and get to sewing. So the block you see here is a very traditional block, and it is generally called meeting place. I'm going to show you how to make this block using improv methods, and specifically stack work improv methods. First, let's just take a look at this block and get a general feel for what's going on here. So I've printed it out in grayscale so we don't get distracted by any colors. You can see that there's 3 colors to the block. So there's this white and then white in the middle. There's a lighter gray and these things going out, and then there's a darker gray here. So this is typically a 3 color block. Obviously, you could have a 4th color here. You could change it up in a lot of different ways, but traditionally, this is the way it's done. It's a 3 color block. If you made this block traditionally, you might use templates, but I'm going to guess most people would do a square in a square and then slice it open and put these pieces in here somehow. I'm not 100% sure. I've never made this block traditionally, but off the top of my head, that's the way I might approach it. But we're going to do it now using improv stack work. We're going to begin by pulling our fabric. So since this block requires 3 fabrics, we're going to pull out 3 different fabrics that we like. So I think I'm going to go with this. I've pulled a blue, a yellow, and an orange, and we're going to make this block. So to get started, we're going to cut a square of each of these fabrics that is approximately the size that we want the finished block to be, plus seam allowances. So there we go. I've got 3 squares of fabric, all, in this case, exactly the same size, but they just need to be approximately the same size. And they don't need to be perfectly square. This thing is sort of longer than it is wide, which is totally fine because this is improv and it's a little more fun when it looks a little wonky. So the point of stack work is that we pile up all the fabric and then we cut all the pieces in exactly the same way. And then we'll be able to take the pieces, rearrange them, and turn them into a 3 color block. We'll get multiple blocks that way. So let's look at our sample block. So the first thing that we want to do is to figure out what line we're going to cut first. And we need to pick a line that goes from one side to the other. Now, we don't want to pick a line like this from there to there because there's no obvious starting and stopping points. So we can pick any of these lines. We can go from here to here, or here to here, or here to here, or here to here. Let's go with this one. And I am going to do this with a ruler for the sake of this video, but you can do this freehand. You do not have to do this with a ruler if you don't want to. I am not measuring anything. I am just looking at this and I'm saying, okay, well, this is a little ways down from there, so a little ways down from there, and it's a little ways in from here. So I have not gone quite far enough. So there we go. That looks good to me. So you don't have to overly fuss about it. So I'm going to cut through all 3 layers. Then I'm going to make this cut from there to there. So I'm just going to move my ruler over. And yeah, that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to go there. And now I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to cut in the other direction. So I'm not going to move any of the pieces. I'm just going to keep cutting, and I'm going to cut along here, and then I'm going to cut along here. Okay, and now we have finished all the cuts that go from edge to edge, and now we need to take care of these little 4 cuts that are here in the middle. So if we pull these out, we can see where they need to be. So basically we need to come in here and cut the tips of these triangles off. Now we need to be careful here because remember, we're going to lose 1/4 of an inch on either side of this. So if we cut too far down there, when we sew this, there won't be any little tip left. So we need to make sure we cut far enough off, remembering that there's 1/4 inch seam allowance around each side and that we're going to lose 1/4 inch here. So I am going to come in and cut right about here. And I'm going to do sort of the same thing on every side. I'm sort of measuring it. I'm going an inch in from this side, but you don't have to measure this, and they don't have to be straight. You could do this sort of at an angle if you wanted to. So there's no real rules about how you have to do this. Just pick what feels right to you. And there we go. All of our pieces for the whole thing are cut. And now what we need to do is mix up the colors and make various blocks. So to do this, I have pulled out my handy dandy lunch trays, which if you've watched my episodes before, you know that I love these things. So they're really nice. They can help you stay organized, and then you can pick these up and carry them over to your sewing machine or to your ironing board, and none of your pieces get mixed up or lost. So it's super handy. All right, so let's build the first one over here. So let's say that we want these points on this one to be orange. So these long pieces here, we want them to be orange. So now let's say that we want these pieces right here, the little triangles, to be blue. So we need to find the blue in each of these stacks. And in this case, they're on the bottom. Now, one thing I will say is when you're dealing with these are cut on the bias and in weird angles. So there is some stretch to these pieces. So just be gentle with them. Don't overhandle them if you want to avoid any kind of drama. Okay, and then in these outside pieces and in this middle piece, we're going to make that the yellow. And there we go. The first one is done. So now let's start on this one. And this one, let's make the points blue. And let's make the little triangles on this one the yellow. And that means everything else needs to be orange. All right, great. And now all the pieces that are left become this block. And there we go. 3 blocks. Each of them using the same 3 fabrics, but mixed up in different ways. Okay, so now let's talk about how we're going to sew the pieces back together again. Let's use this one as our example. So when you do stack work, there's a lot of different ways that you could sew this together. It would work perfectly fine. But to avoid confusion, I always suggest sewing everything back together in the opposite order that you cut it. So the last thing that we cut, remember, was we cut these small triangles. So that's what we'll sew first. We'll sew all of these little blue triangles onto the outside yellow pieces. And as usual, I have used black thread for these videos. I would not do that in real life, but so that you can see what's going on, I have used black thread. I have sewn 1/4 inch away from each of these sides, and now I'm going to press these towards the dark fabric. And the way I do that is to first come in here and I finger press, and then I use this handy dandy little clover seam roller. Mine is purple, they are usually blue, and I just roll it over like that, and then I take it to the ironing board and I press it. Now it's at this point that if you're new to stack work, that you might be looking at this and thinking you did something wrong, but you didn't. So remember, when you cut these pieces the way we did, we didn't factor in any seam allowances. So whenever we sew things together, things aren't going to line up exactly right. But there's nothing to worry about. All we have to do is come in here and straighten up the sides, and then we fix the problem. So let's do that. Let's look at this piece here. So you can see it sticks out too far here and too far here. So generally what I'm going to do is turn it around this way. To this side is the side that I don't want to cut, and the side I do want to cut is farther away from me. This is just how I do it. You can find the way that's the most comfortable to you. And then I'll put my rotary cutter right next to the line, and then I'll just roll up and cut off the rest of it. To do the other side, I could do it like this, right? But the reason I don't do it that way is because it's hard to not sliver something off there. So what I'll do instead is flip it over and cut like that. And then I have a perfect little triangle. Now I'm going to do that for all the other ones. Okay, so the next step in the construction process can go a lot of different ways. But the way I'm going to do it is to put these 3 pieces together, put these 3 pieces together, and put these 3 pieces together. And now we just sew these together. And there she is. So after I pressed the very last seam over on my ironing board, I did come in here with my tailor's clapper, which is just a big chunk of wood, and I set it on there for about 30 seconds. And that just makes sure that everything is nice and super flat. I find tailor's clappers really, really handy, particularly for improv work where things can get a little lumpy sometimes. But here's our meeting place block, and as you can see, it looks very similar to this. Obviously, we didn't measure anything, so things are a little wonky, but it also has things sticking out that are too long that we obviously need to get rid of. So we need to cut it down. One way you could approach this is to use a square ruler that is the size that you need it to be, and then obviously you could just trim around there. The other thing you can do, which is what we're going to do, is just to come in and cut it off sort of straight. So when you do sort of straight cutting, you can just come in here and eyeball it and cut it off without using a ruler. But in this case, I will use a ruler. There are no rules in improv. If anyone tells you you can't use a ruler because it's improv, they're lying to you. You don't have to listen to those improv quilt police. If you like a ruler, use a ruler, okay? I go back and forth depending on the situation. Sometimes I like a ruler. Sometimes I like to do things freehand. So I've cut these first two sides, and the way I'm doing this is I'm just lining up my ruler along this yellow edge for the most part, and then just cutting. It's nothing more complicated than that. So as you can see, using that method I just used, it got pretty square. It's not perfectly square, but you know, I like things a little wonky, so I'm good with that. My next step is to take these two blocks and sew them together in exactly the same way so that I'll have 3 blocks. And there we go. There's our 3 meeting place blocks, all using the same 3 fabrics, just mixed up in different ways. And we've done it all improvisationally. And because of that, this one isn't quite as square as the other 2, but as usual, I'm totally cool with that. I could cut this down more square if I need it to be later on, but for now, I'm just going to leave it like that. Now you could repeat this process again using a stack of the exact same 3 fabrics and make 3 more of these, and then 3 more of them, and then 3 more of them. And then you could make a quilt that feels very traditional in a lot of ways, but has a lot of interest because things aren't perfect. The wonkiness just makes the eye keep moving around the quilt, which I find very interesting. The other thing that you could do is repeat this again with 3 completely different fabrics, and then repeat it again with 3 other fabrics. So that would give you a super scrappy quilt top. The other thing that you could do is keep one fabric the same. Let's say you really, really like this blue. So every single stack that you cut will have this blue in it. And then that way you have one color that's consistent throughout the entire quilt. So there's lots and lots of ways that you can approach this to come up with a very cool looking final quilt that only uses this block, if that's what you were after. You can obviously use these blocks in any combination with any other blocks as well. Some people think that when you do improv work, your stuff is all going to be strange, abstract, non-traditional, but as you can see here, you can really lean hard into modern traditionalism if that is your vibe. If you really like the overall look of traditional blocks, but just want to put a little fun, liberated spin on it, stack work can really help you get there quite fast. I've gone ahead and made a few examples that you might find interesting. I hope you've enjoyed learning about how to make the meeting place block. I'll see you again here next time for another episode of The Quilty Life with me, Jenn Burt.